Tokyo, 1988, a city of neon lights and hidden darkness. One girl entered a house, but she never walked out. This is not just a story, it is a descent into hell. Tokyo. The streets were cold, and the shadows were watching. Her name was Junko, 17 years old, kind, and full of life. She was cycling home after work, thinking about her future, but she didn't know. She was being hunted. 4 boys, with hearts made of stone, followed her into the night. A sudden crash, a scream cut short, and then silence. She was taken to a house, a normal house, in a normal neighborhood. Inside, the nightmare began. They told her, if you scream, your parents die. She stayed quiet, hoping for mercy, but there was nitrogen monoxide mercy in that room. Only pain, and the smell of fear. She thought it would end in a few hours. She was wrong. It was only day 1. How much can a human soul endure? We're about to find out. The walls began to close in, and the world outside simply disappeared. 10 days, in total darkness. The house looked normal from the outside, but inside, it was a slaughterhouse. They didn't just want her captive. They wanted to break her, day and night. There was no difference. Every time the door creaked open, her heart stopped. The boys invited friends, over 100 of them, to join the cruelty. Can you imagine? 100 people, and not one helped her. They treated her like an object, a toy, a thing with no soul. She was forced to stay naked in the freezing cold. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but they gave her nothing. When she begged for water, they gave her acid. The pain was unbearable. Her body was covered in burns, marks of a hatred she couldn't understand. She looked at the window, dreaming of the sky, but the glass was a barrier to a world she would never see again. Her spirit was fading, but the boys were just getting started. They found new ways to hurt her. Every single DH. Why did nobody hear her? Why did the walls stay silent? She was a ghost, while still alive. And the worst was yet to come. Day 20. She couldn't take it anymore. The pain was a constant fire, burning through her soul. One night, the door was left unlocked, just an inch. She crawled, her legs broken, her body screaming. The floor was cold, but freedom was just a few feet away. She reached for the phone, her fingers trembling, her heart hammering against her ribs. The dial tone was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. But then, a hand grabbed her hair. A cold, heavy silence filled the room. They caught her, and for that, they decided she must suffer even more. They dropped heavy iron weights on her knees, crushing the bone. She couldn't walk. She couldn't stand. She could only crawl, like an animal, in her own filth. They laughed as she begged for death. Death was no longer a fear. It was a dream. But they wouldn't let her go. Not yet. The darkness was now absolute, and the shadows were getting hungrier. Day 35. The end was near, and she knew it. Her body was no longer hers. It was a map of scars. She couldn't eat. She couldn't breathe without agony. The boys were bored, and boredom makes monsters even crueler. They used lighters to turn her skin into a wasteland. The smell of smoke, the sound of her own voice fading into a whimper. Her eyes were swollen shut, but she could still feel the cold iron against her skin. She was losing her mind, drifting into a void where the pain couldn't reach her. Was she still a person, or just a memory of one? The boys didn't care. To them, she was just a game that was almost over. Then, the final spark. A loss at gambling, a surge of rage, and the monster turned his eyes back to the corner. He didn't see a girl. He saw a target. The beating lasted for hours. No more crying, no more begging, just the sound of heavy boots and the breaking of what was left. The flame was flickering, ready to go out. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 44 days, she wasn't afraid, because soon they could never hurt her again. The silence was coming, and it was loud. January 4th. The nightmare finally ended, but the horror was just beginning. She was gone. 44 days of hell over. But the monsters were still there, and they had a problem. A body in a house, in a quiet neighborhood. They didn't feel guilt. They only felt fear of being caught. They found a 55-gallon drum, large, cold, empty. They pushed her inside. The girl who once had dreams, now just a secret to be buried. Then they poured the concrete, liquid stone, filling the gaps, hardening around her. They drove to a construction site in Wakasu and dumped the drum. They thought the secret was safe, under the heavy gray weight of the earth. But secrets have a way of screaming, even through stone. Months later, the police found them. The world watched, waiting for justice, waiting for the monsters to pay for the blood on their hands. But the law was weak. Because they were young, they were given a second chance. 7 years, 10 years, 20 years. That was the price of a human life. The concrete eventually broke, but the scars on history remain. Her name was Junko, and her story is a reminder that sometimes the real monsters live right next door. The drum is empty now, but the silence stays forever. A heavy parcel sits on a newsroom desk. Inside, the Polaroids of 100 missing boys, and a letter that would freeze the blood of an entire nation. I have killed 100 children, it read. Now, come and find me. November 1999, Lahore, Pakistan. The office of the Daily Jang newspaper was buzzing like any other day, until a package arrived. It was addressed to the crime department. Jamil Chishti, a veteran reporter, opened it. As he pulled out the contents, a stack of photographs spilled onto his desk. One by one, he looked at the faces. Young boys, some smiling, some staring blankly, all innocent. But it wasn't just photos. There was a letter, handwritten, cold, and calculated. The words on that paper would haunt the city forever. I am Javid Ekbal. I have murdered 100 children. The room went silent. The letter detailed a horror beyond human comprehension. He didn't just kill them. He dismantled them. He dissolved their bodies in a massive vat of acid, until not a bone was left. I wanted to make 100 mothers cry, the letter said, just like my mother cried for me. Jamil couldn't believe it. Was this a sick joke? A prank? He grabbed a friend and rushed to the address mentioned in the letter. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. A house that looked ordinary. But as they stepped inside, the smell hit them, a chemical stench, thick and suffocating. And there, in the corner of the room, sat a large blue metal drum. Jamil's heart hammered against his ribs. He reached for the lid. His hands were shaking. Should he open it? Does he really want to see what is inside? The truth was waiting, and it was more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Jamil held his breath and lifted the lid of the blue drum. The fumes burned his eyes. The stench of acid and decomposing flesh was overwhelming. Inside, he saw the remains dissolved, unrecognizable. A nightmare made of liquid and bone. Jamil stumbled back. His hands were burned by the acid splashing from the rim. He realized then, the letter was not a prank. It was a confession from a monster. The police arrived within minutes, sirens screaming through the narrow streets of Lahore. They cordoned off the house at 16B Ravi Road. But what they found inside made even the toughest officers turn away in horror. 85 pairs of shoes. Small shoes, neatly lined up, vests, and pants, all carefully packed in bags. Each bag had a tag, a name, an age, a home address. Javid Iqbal hadn't just killed them. He had kept a trophy of every single life he stole. On the walls, more photos, a gallery of victims. The police searched every inch of that house. In the kitchen, more chemicals. In the bedroom, the chains. The news spread like wildfire. Thousands of desperate parents rushed to the street, screaming names of children who had been missing for months. The atmosphere was thick with grief and rage. A mother pushed through the crowd, her eyes red from years of crying. An officer showed her a small metal bracelet, a Kara, found at the bottom of the acid vat. The only thing the acid couldn't melt. The mother collapsed. "That is my son's," she wailed. "My baby is gone." The evidence was all there. The house was a factory of death. But there was one thing missing. Javed Iqbal was nowhere to be found. He had vanished, like a ghost in the night. Was he dead? Or was he still out there, watching from the shadows? The hunt for the most wanted man in Pakistan had officially begun. Who was Javed Iqbal? And how did a human being turn into such a beast to the world? He looked like a successful businessman, born in 1956, into a wealthy family in Lahore. He had everything: money, status, and a future. His father bought him a steel factory, a massive business to run. But inside that factory, something dark was growing. Javed was a predator, hiding in plain sight. He hired young boys to work for him, but not for labor. He targeted the weak, the poor, the ones who had no one to protect them. But in 1998, the mask finally slipped. Javed was caught with 2 young boys in his home. The police didn't just arrest him. They broke him. They beat him 100 lashes until he collapsed into a coma. For 22 days, he lay in a hospital bed, silent, but listening. He heard his mother crying at his bedside. Every single day, his family turned their backs on him, but his mother stayed. When Javed finally woke up and was released from prison, he went home to find silence. His mother, the only person who loved him, was dead. He believed the stress of his arrest had killed her. In his twisted mind, he didn't see his own crimes. He saw himself as a victim, and he wanted the world to feel his pain. "They made my mother cry," he wrote in his diary. "Now, I will make 100 mothers cry." He sold his factory. He sold his luxury cars. He took all his money and moved to the small rental house on Ravi Road. He was no longer a businessman. He was a man on a mission of blood. He calculated the cost of acid, the strength of chains, and the silence of the night. The hunt was about to begin, and Lahore's most vulnerable children were his targets. He needed a place where children disappeared, and nobody noticed. He chose Data Durbar, one of the largest shrines in South Asia, a place of prayer, of hope, and of desperation. Thousands of people gathered there every day. Among the crowds were the runaways, the orphans, the kids looking for work, or just a piece of bread. Javed Iqbal watched them, like a wolf watching a flock. He was kind. He offered them food, clean clothes, and a warm place to sleep. To a homeless child, he looked like an angel. He brought them back to 16B Ravi Road. He gave them a new shirt and a bowl of hot food. He even turned on the television, a rare luxury in those days. The children would sit, mesmerized by the screen, laughing at the cartoons, feeling safe. But behind them, fixed to the ceiling, was a heavy iron chain. Javed would wait. He would watch their joy, knowing it was their last. When they were completely distracted, he moved. One quick motion, the chain around the neck. A sudden jerk. The struggle was brief. Small hands clawed at the iron, but a monster's grip is unyielding. The light in their eyes went out. In front of a flickering TV screen, he didn't stop there. He reached for his camera. He wanted a record of his victory. He took a photo of the lifeless face, then carefully undressed the body. He folded the clothes, tagged them with a number, and added them to his collection. Then, the acid. He lowered the small body into the blue drum, filled with a lethal cocktail of chemicals. By morning, there was nothing left but a thick, dark sludge. He repeated this 100 times, 100 lives, vanished into the sewers of Lahore. He was a ghost, committing the perfect crime, right under the nose of the world. But why did he stop? Why did he send that letter? The answer is as chilling as the crimes themselves. The manhunt was the largest in the history of the country, but Javid Iqbal was playing a different game. December 30th, while the police were searching the borders, a man walked into the office of the Daily Jang. He was calm. He was clean-shaven. He looked like an ordinary citizen. He walked up to the reception and spoke 3 words that stopped every heart in the room. "I am Javid Iqbal." He didn't run. He didn't hide. He demanded a press conference. He wanted the world to see his face, to hear his voice, to know his reasoning. In front of the cameras, there was nitrogen monoxide guilt. No tears. He spoke about his crimes like a businessman discussing a finished project. "I have no regrets," he said. "I wanted to prove a point." The trial began, and the atmosphere was electrifying. Outside the court, thousands of people were screaming for his blood. On March 16th, the judge delivered a verdict that would become famous worldwide. A sentence so brutal, it had never been heard of in modern history. The judge looked Javid in the eye and said, "You will be strangled with the same chain you used on the children. Your body will be cut into 100 pieces, and those pieces will be dissolved in acid, just as you did to your victims." The courtroom gasped. The international media erupted. Human rights groups called it barbaric. But the families of the victims finally felt a spark of justice. Javid Iqbal stood there, silent. He had wanted fame, and now the whole world was watching. But the law and the hand of fate had one final twist in store. Execution was set. The drum was waiting. But would Javid Iqbal ever face the acid, or did he have one last secret to hide? The world was waiting for the execution. 100 pieces. A drum of acid, the ultimate justice. But Javid Iqbal would never reach the gallows. October 8th, Kote Lakpat Jail, one of the most secure prisons in the world. Javid was kept in a high-security cell, under constant watch, or so the world was told. A guard walked past his cell and stopped. Javid Iqbal was hanging, his body limped, tied to the bars with his own bedsheet. He was dead. In the cell right next to him, his young accomplice, Sugd, was also found dead. A double suicide, in the most guarded section of the prison. But as the investigation began, the story started to crumble. The CCTV cameras, which monitored the hallway 24 hours a day, had been turned OFF. From 10 p.m. until the moment the bodies were found, there was nitrogen monoxide footage. The guards who were supposed to be on duty were nowhere to be found. Was it a suicide, or was it a silencing? Some say the state couldn't carry out such a brutal sentence under international pressure. Others believe someone powerful didn't want Javid to talk anymore. He took his secrets to the grave. Who helped him? How did he afford those gallons of expensive acid while being broke? The questions remain unanswered. The house at 16B Ravi Road was eventually torn down, but the ground still feels heavy. Javid Iqbal wanted to be remembered. He wanted his name to live in infamy. And as the sun sets over Lahore, the silence in that neighborhood is a chilling reminder. The monster is gone, but the scars on 100 families will never heal. Sleep well, little ones. The nightmare is finally over. She was only 14, trapped in a home with no love, and a father who was a monster. When a stranger called her by mistake, she thought she found a friend. She was wrong. She had just walked into a trap that would involve 44 boys and 11 months of pure hell. South Korea, in the city of Ulsan, lived a girl named Choi. She was only 14, but her eyes carried the weight of 1,000 years. Her home wasn't a sanctuary. It was a prison, an alcoholic father, a broken family, and a life filled with shadows. Choi was alone, truly, deeply alone, until one day, the phone rang. A wrong number. A boy named Park. He was kind. He listened. He spoke to her with a warmth she had never known. For 1 year, they shared secrets. They shared dreams. Park became her anchor, her safe place in a world that only gave her pain. In January 2004, they decided to meet. Choi traveled to a city called Myeong, her heart full of hope. She reached the address, a quiet motel. She knocked on the door, smiling, finally ready to meet her friend. The door opened. Park was there, but he didn't look like a friend. His eyes were cold. He offered her a drink, and within minutes, the world began to spin. The lights faded, and darkness took over. When she woke up, the nightmare had become a reality. There wasn't just one boy in that room. There were 11, and that was only the beginning. The trap had closed, and for the next 11 months, Joy would forget what it felt like to be 11 months, 330 days of unthinkable cruelty. Choi was no longer a student. She was a prisoner of a gang of 44 monsters. They didn't just attack her once. They turned her life into a repeating nightmare. Every time they called, she had to go. If she refused, they showed her the camera. They had recorded everything, every moment of her pain, every second of her shame. If you don't come, they whispered, everyone will see. They threatened to post the videos on the internet, to show her school, to tell her father. Choi was terrified. She felt like she had a weight around her neck, pulling her deeper into the mud. But the horror grew. The monsters weren't satisfied with just one victim. They forced Choi to bring her 13-year-old sister and her 16-year-old cousin. They used the same threats, the same chains of fear. The most disturbing part? Many of these boys went to the same school as Choi. Every day, she walked down the hallways, seeing their faces. She sat in classrooms, feeling their eyes on the back of her head, hearing their muffled laughs. To the teachers, they were just normal students. To Choi, they were the devils who were tearing her soul apart. She couldn't tell her father. He was already a shadow in her life, a man who only knew how to use his fists. She had nobody to turn to, no wall to lean on. The trauma started to bleed into her mind. She felt like she was already dead, just a ghost walking through a world that didn't care. The pain, the guilt, and the sheer weight of 44 monsters was too much for one 14-year-old girl. And soon, she would reach a breaking point that would change everything. A human heart can only take so much. The fear, the pain, the crushing guilt of not being able to protect her sister. Choi reached her limit. She swallowed a handful of sleeping pills, praying for a sleep that would never end. She wanted to disappear, but fate had other plans. Her aunt found her and rushed her to the hospital. The doctors saved her life, but when they saw her body, they froze. The bruises, the scars, the silent evidence of a year in hell. They told her aunt, she needs an examination. Something is very wrong. The truth finally came out. Every dark detail, every name, every recording. On November 25th, the police were finally called. Choi thought the nightmare was over. She thought the law would protect her. She was wrong. The police officers didn't treat her like a victim. They treated her like an enemy. They sat her in a room and brought the monsters in. Face to face. Did he touch you here? They asked, pointing at her body while the boys smirked. They refused to give her female officers. They mocked her pain. One officer leaned in and hissed, "Did you seduce them? Why only you? You must have done something." Victim blaming. In its most pure and UGL form, Choi was breaking all over again. But the betrayal didn't stop at the police station, because the police were careless. Her identity leaked to the media. Suddenly, the whole country knew her name. The monster's parents didn't feel shame. They felt rage. They stormed her school. They broke into her hospital room. "You ruined our sons' lives," they screamed, as if she was the criminal. Choi was drowning, and the people meant to save her were the ones holding her head underwater. The final blow didn't come from the monsters or the police. It came from her own blood. Choi's father, the man who should have been her shield. saw her trauma as an opportunity. While Choi was suffering in a psychiatric ward, her father was meeting with the parents of the attackers. They offered him money, 50 million won. In exchange, they wanted a signature, a settlement. Her father didn't hesitate. He signed the papers, selling his daughter's justice for a stack of cash. He didn't use the money for her doctors or her recovery. He spent every single cent on alcohol, drowning his conscience while his daughter drowned in grief. Because of that signature, the case crumbled in court. 44 boys, 44 monsters. How many went to prison? 0. A few were sent to juvenile centers for a few months. The rest, the judge let them go. They have bright futures, the court said. We shouldn't ruin their lives over one mistake. But what about Choi's future? She was expelled from school. She was hunted by the media. She became a ghost in her own country, moving from city to city, trying to outrun a shadow that wouldn't leave. The legal system closed the files. The public moved on. For 20 years, the 44 monsters lived normal lives. They got jobs. They got married. They had families of their own. They thought the world had forgotten. But the internet has a long memory. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. The truth came screaming back. A digital vigilante began releasing their names, their faces, their current jobs. One was a car salesman. One ran a cafe. One even had a girlfriend who was a police officer. The world was furious. The monsters were finally exposed. But is it enough? Can a leaked name heal a broken soul? Can 20 years of silence be forgiven? Choi is out there somewhere, living a quiet life. She is a survivor, but she is also a reminder that sometimes the loudest scream is the one nobody wants to hear. The meringue case is over, but the scars are forever.